Hey, welcome back to Landing the Moon. I'm Max.
And I'm Blake. Big week. Actually, big couple of months.
Okay, so get this. ESA Director General Josef Aschbacher dropped an op-ed on May 18th asking, quote, "Are we pilots or are we passengers?" And honestly, that title says everything.
It does. NASA paused the Lunar Gateway without consulting its partners. ESA had hardware in production. According to the Register, Aschbacher basically said Europe has become too exposed to decisions beyond its control.
Hardware, already built, now in limbo. We're going to dig into what that pattern actually means for the Artemis Alliance.
And then there's the money. The White House FY2027 budget request, per Space News, is $18.8 billion for NASA. That's a 23% cut from what Congress enacted in FY26.
Which, plot twist, is the exact same number OMB asked for last year. Congress said no then.
And yet, here we are.
Congress has a counter. The House Appropriations Committee passed $24.4 billion flat on a 32-28 party line vote. Exploration gets a boost. Science takes a 17% cut.
So better than a White House request, but still doing real damage. Whether that spreadsheet split between exploration and science holds when you look at the actual hardware, that's the question we're going to pressure test.
And we close out with predictions. I've got a number on where the Senate science line lands. Blake has a number on the final enacted budget.
Falsifiable predictions. We'll revisit them. That's the deal.
Accountability. Love it. All right, let's start with Aschbacher and the geopolitics. Okay, so get this. The head of the European Space Agency just published a piece called "Are We Pilots or Are We Passengers?" May 18th. That's not a think tank paper. That's the Director General going public.
Josef Aschbacher. And the timing is deliberate. The ESA Council meets in June. The Intermediate Ministerial Council is in December. He's not writing for Washington. He's writing for his own member states.
Which is wild when you think about it. He's running a pressure campaign from the outside in.
Walk me through what actually broke the relationship, though, because ESA and NASA have had friction before.
So here's where it gets good. NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman announced they're pausing Gateway, the Lunar Gateway space station, and almost certainly canceling it. And ESA was building two modules for that thing.
The IHAB and Esprit.
Exactly. The International Habitation Module, built with JAXA, and the Esprit Communications Module, both now just sitting there. Nobody called ESA before that announcement.
Right. And that's the pattern Aschbacher's actually naming. The Register covered this and quoted an agency insider from 2025 calling NASA an abusive spouse who could lash out at any moment in unpredictable ways.
Someone inside ESA said that on the record?
To a reporter, yeah.
Great diplomacy. Very smooth.
But Aschbacher himself put it more carefully. He wrote, "Europe has become too exposed to decisions beyond its control." And the punchline is he's right. ESA built hardware for Gateway in good faith. NASA changed the architecture. Partners were notified after, not before.
And this isn't the first time. Mars sample return, same story. ESA had the Earth return orbiter under construction. Washington pulled funding with essentially no consultation.
So the question Aschbacher's forcing his member states to answer before June is, do you want seats on someone else's rocket, or do you want to build your own?
Which sounds inspiring until you check the price tag on autonomous human spaceflight.
Right. And ESA has 23 member states, each with their own budget pressures. That's not a fast-moving organization.
So the frustration is real, the leverage is limited, and the architecture NASA just blew up wasn't just a policy call. It was hardware people had already built.
Which brings up the obvious question. If NASA's canceling Gateway and telling partners afterward, what's actually driving those calls? And what does the money look like? Because someone had to sign off on this somewhere in April.
So the money. The White House dropped its FY 2027 budget request in April, and Blake, I have to say, this thing reads like a sequel nobody asked for.
Space News had the numbers first. $18.8 billion total, down from $24.4 billion. That's a 23% cut across the agency.
And here's the thing, $18.8 billion is the exact same number OMB asked for in FY 2026. Congress rejected it wholesale.
Yeah.
They passed $24.4 billion instead. Now the same figure walks back dressed as a new proposal.
Right. That's where it's sitting with. The administration knows Congress rejected this number once already. So you have to ask, where does that assumption come from, that this time is different?
It's a copy-paste job. Axios literally reported errors in the document where it still says 2026 instead of 2027.
That's thorough.
Okay, so get this. Science Mission Directorate down 47% from $7.25 billion to $3.9 billion. Astrophysics down 65%. Heliophysics down 52%.
And the missions, Chandra, Osiris Apex, according to Space News, they're not even named in the document. They just disappear. Congress revived both of those after the FY2026 request, and here they vanish again.
While the crew from Artemis II was literally still in space when this dropped.
2 days after launch, and the same document calls SLS, the rocket that just flew that crew, grossly expensive and delayed. The Register reported that word for word.
Wait. They want to replace SLS and Orion with something more cost-effective, but offers zero named replacement, zero timeline. Meanwhile, Starship hasn't completed a crewed test flight.
Let's pressure test that. More cost-effective than what exactly? SLS cost around $4 billion per launch and is 140% over budget. Those are real problems. But you can't retire a system mid-program without a certified successor in hand.
The ISS line is almost as wild. Space operations drops from $4.2 billion to $3 billion. That's a $1.2 billion cut to a station with no commercial replacement online yet.
So the ask is, cut the science, phase out the rocket, underfund the station, and trust that cheaper commercial options materialize on schedule. That's not a plan. That's a bet.
And Congress already called that bet once and won. The Planetary Society described this as the same cuts being resurrected after being rejected by, quote, overwhelming bipartisan majorities.
Which is actually where the story gets interesting, because House Appropriators already responded. Same number Congress passed last year, $24.4 billion. Their counteroffer is already on the table.
So Congress did what Congress does. House Appropriations came back May 13th with $24.4 billion flat for NASA, rejected the White House request outright, 32-28 party line vote.
And that vote tells you something right there. Zero Democratic support. So whatever protection this bill gives NASA is fragile.
Right, and here's where it gets interesting. According to the Planetary Society's breakdown, exploration gets bumped up $1.14 billion from FY2026, $2.6 billion for SLS, $1.4 billion for Orion. And the bill literally prohibits NASA from touching SLS funds until a commercial alternative is human-rated and proven to match or beat SLS capabilities.
That's interesting. So Congress is basically saying, you want to kill SLS? Show me the replacement first. Walk me through the math on that.
The math is there is no prepared replacement, so SLS stays funded by default.
And science absorbs the hit.
Yeah. Planetary cited $6.0 billion for the Science Mission Directorate, down 17% from $7.25 billion in FY2026. Space News reported Earth Science takes nearly a 40% cut.
So it's a smaller catastrophe, not fixed.
That's exactly right. The White House wanted 47% off the top. Congress had 17%, and everyone's supposed to feel good about that.
And last year, the final numbers tracked closer to the Senate version. So the question is whether the Senate even acts before October 1.
They haven't released a bill yet. The Senate Appropriations Committee is expected to move in early June, so watch that space.
Okay, but I want to flag something. The House bill treats exploration and science as separate budget lines. Exploration goes up, science goes down. Clean split on a spreadsheet.
But that's not how the hardware actually works.
Right. Say more.
So here's the thing. A lot of those science and partnership line items are structurally load-bearing for the hardware itself.
And that's where this gets complicated fast.
So here's the concrete engineering problem nobody's putting in the budget memo. ESA builds the Orion service module. That's the propulsion heart of every Artemis mission. ESMs 5 and 6 are still in production in Airbus's Bremen clean rooms right now, slated for Artemis 5 and 6.
And the contracts are signed. So the hardware argument is what exactly? The hardware keeps coming until the political will doesn't. Look, you strain the NASA-ESA relationship badly enough, ESA member states start asking why they're building modules for a program that keeps changing on them without notice.
Okay, let's pressure test that. The White House would say SpaceX handles this, commercial takes over. Why is that wrong? Oh man, because Starship HLS hasn't done a crewed demo flight. It hasn't even completed orbital refueling certification. As of May 2026, Wikipedia cites both landers as still maturing toward human rating. The first crewed moon landing just moved to Artemis IV in 2028 because the landers weren't ready.
So Artemis III, late 2027, is now a low Earth orbit rendezvous test, not a landing.
Right. NASA Administrator Isaacman confirmed that target in April before the House Appropriations Committee. Delays in both Starship HLS and Blue Origin's Blue Moon pushed the original early 2027 goal.
So the commercial replacement argument requires hardware that isn't human-rated yet, supplied by a company whose CEO has a very personal interest in a Mars colonization timeline.
I'm just saying the incentive structure is not perfectly aligned with Artemis. And here's the thing the budget spreadsheet completely misses. Science funding tells engineers what astronauts will actually land on. Terrain mapping, ice distribution, regolith composition. CLPS missions are the reconnaissance layer for the hardware the exploration budget is paying for.
So cancel science, you're flying hardware toward a surface you don't fully understand.
You can't separate the line items. They're physically connected.
That's a pretty clean argument. The engineering case against the budget split is just the missions don't work in isolation.
Exactly. And none of this is new. We've been here before. Like exactly here. Same cuts, same congressional fight, same restored funding. Second year in a row, the White House sent $18.8 billion. Congress already rejected that number once.
Which means the question stops being, can Congress fix it? And starts being, does fixing it the same way every year actually count as fixing it?
So here's what's wild about where we landed last segment. Congress is set to reject the same number they already rejected, and we're all acting like that's a win.
That's the consensus trap right there. Everyone assumes Congress fixes it, so the situation reads as fine. But the annual uncertainty window itself does real damage regardless of the final number.
Okay, so get this. The Planetary Society's piece flags that Osiris Apex and Chandra have been proposed for cancellation twice now, saved twice, and the program managers running those missions are in permanent limbo.
Walk me through what that actually costs, not in dollars, in institutional terms.
You can't sign contracts with confidence. You can't retain the people who know the mission. You get a 2-year uncertainty spike, Congress resolves it, and then you do it all over again.
Right. And that knowledge loss is real. The Planetary Society's report noted more than 4,000 civil servants were pressured to leave during 2025 alone. Some of that is irreversible.
Irreplaceable, actually. The report's own language.
Now here's where I want to push back a little, because Isaacman's cost overrun argument at the April 27th hearing deserves a fair read. $15 billion in overrun since 2009. The exploration upper stage went from $962 million to over $2 billion. That's not invented.
No, the numbers are real. I'll give him that. The current structure does reward programs for being too big to cancel.
So where do you land on it? Efficient restructuring or bad medicine for a real diagnosis?
Both, actually. The diagnosis is accurate. The cure is proposing the exact same cuts Congress already killed. That's not efficiency, that's Groundhog Day with a PowerPoint.
And Draminos, while Dragonfly went from $850 million to $3.4 billion, so it's not like the programs being saved are models of fiscal discipline.
Exactly. Nobody's hands are clean.
So the question isn't whether the overruns are real, it's whether OMB submitting the same $18.8 billion number 2 years running and Congress rejecting it 2 years running constitutes a policy. Because from where I sit, it doesn't.
It's a stalemate dressed up as governance.
Which brings us somewhere uncomfortable. The Senate markup was expected in early June, and last year, the final enacted number tracked closer to the Senate's version than the House's.
So the Senate number is actually the more consequential, and we don't have it yet.
which means the real fight is still ahead. And there's another wrinkle we haven't touched yet that makes even a congressional win a lot shakier than it looks. Oh, you're going to love this part. Put a number on it first. We'll get into it next.
Okay, so the Senate Appropriations Committee had their FY2027 CJS markup scheduled for June 4th. According to Space Policy Online, it's actually been rescheduled.
So we're in limbo again, which honestly is the pattern.
Right, and here's the thing. The Senate number matters more than the House number. Last year, the final enacted figure tracked closer to the Senate's version, so whatever comes out of that markup is arguably the real opening bid.
Walk me through why that is.
Senate has to get 60 votes to avoid a filibuster. That forces bipartisan buy-in, and bipartisan in space terms usually means the China framing kicks in.
Senator Collins literally said it in the FY 2026 markup. The committee's language was about staying competitive with China. That's a pressure point both parties will use.
Which is why I'll go on record. I think the Senate science number comes in above the House's $6.0 billion. China framing gives cover to Republicans who'd otherwise hold the line on spending.
That's the optimistic read. Here's the part most people aren't talking about, though. OMB already demonstrated with NSF and NIH this year that you can lose the spending fight even after winning the appropriations fight. The slow walk. Exactly. According to Nature and reporting from COSA, NIH was issuing only about 30% of its normal grant volume months after Congress passed its funding. NSF was at roughly 20%. OMB just sat on the spending plans. And OMB Director Voot has said out loud that appropriations are a ceiling, not a floor. The Planetary Society flagged that exact quote. So even if Congress passes $24.4 billion for NASA, OMB can require spend plan approval, delay it indefinitely, and achieve the same real-world effect through the back door. Which is why the China argument matters twice. It's the one lever that might actually move the OMB, because it's the one argument that embarrasses the White House politically if they ignore it. Let me put a number on the table then. My prediction, NASA's FY 2027 final enacted budget lands below $22 billion. Congress wins the vote. OMB wins the execution.
All right, I'll take the other side, above $22 billion. The bipartisan noise about China's lunar program is too loud to ignore, and I think the Senate science line holds higher than the House version. Let me revisit this next episode.
Predictions on the record, the best kind of accountability.
We'll see who looks smart in 6 months. Okay, so get this. We covered a lot of ground today. The pilots or passengers question from Aschbacher wasn't just a think piece title. It captured the whole episode.
Right, and the ESA insider quote the Register surfaced, calling NASA an abusive spouse in 2025, that's the kind of thing you can't unhear.
No, you really can't. And once you pair that with the House Appropriations bill keeping NASA flat at $24.4 billion, while the White House is still submitting the same rejected number from last year.
The Senate markup is the thing to watch. That's the document that actually matters here.
100%. Bottom line from today, the real risk to Artemis isn't a single bad budget number. It's the structural instability that makes every partner question whether the seat of the table is real.
Where does that assumption come from? That's a question every partner is asking right now.
And we want you asking it too. If this episode helped you make sense of what's happening, share it with someone who's still confused about why we're going back to the moon.
Subscribe wherever you listen. We'll be back to check our predictions, hold ourselves accountable. Max, good ep.
Good ep, Max. See you next week.